Good morning, afternoon, or evening. Not Vietnam, not Shadowloo, but YouTube. It's your boy Animaine coming to you with a pre-recorded fake live, not actual live, because this is at late at night, and we're all adult-ass adults with lives and jobs and things to do in the morning. So this is unfortunately not an actual stream, but I am still joined by three of the dopest individuals you will find in the indie comic scene. I'm joined by the men, the myths, the legends, the art, and the pen behind Common America, Black Hops, and Soul Finder. I got Mark Pellegrini, I got Timothy Lim, and I got Douglas Ernst, the iconic comics trio. What's good? What is going on? How y'all doing?
Hey, what's
You,
up?
Thanks for having
yo,
us back.
you did that in reverse alphabetical order so I could go first. Oh yeah, I don't see that very often.
Listen, I have to switch it up. I have to keep y'all on y'all toes, and I have to keep the audience on their toes. If I just keep doing the same thing all the time, it'll be too predictable. I mean, then I don't want it. I want it to be as unexpected as when you brought up the whole Misha's feet thing last time you were on, Mark. I want it to just smack people and have them not know what's going on at all.
Oh
But
yeah, this week is gonna be Kimiko's like toenails, right?
see already. It's bad enough. Don't tempt me because I already have the Common Academy thing pulled up here because I'm behind on that. I need to get caught up on that. But I already watch everything like a hawk so that I can know when stuff drops. Because when we gonna talk about it, but I know what's coming. I know what's coming for issue 8, and y'all ain't right.
Oh, do you?
Y'all ain't right. I seen the pictures. I seen the previews. Which one? Which one of y'all was it? Was it with Mark or Tim? Which one?
I'm gonna say
I'm
Tim. So
yeah, I'm normally the one who selects what gets released into the public.
Why are you doing this, man? I thought we were cool, man. Why would you do this to me, man?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yes, you do. You first of all, you did it. Okay. So for those of y'all who don't know, before we get into nuts and bolts of things, let me just say that all three of these guys on this panel have been doing the damn thing in terms of not just comics, but growing the iconic brand, growing their scope, growing the fan base, and just doing. I feel like they're doing, whether they mean to do it or not, they are they have brought in and are continuing to bring in an era where not only are we just making new books, it's not just about the books. I feel like it's a true experience. Like whenever there's a campaign about to launch, when the fact that there are people on my timeline who are just every Wednesday I go, hey guys, it's Waku Waku Wednesday. Every time it does not fail. And every I already know. First, I look out for what's the first issue that's gonna drop, and then after a while, I'm thinking, all right, so when's the next crossover book coming? When's the crossover book coming? I get one book. I'll get one book from one person. I'm like, the characters from the other thing gonna pop up in that too. I could get the next Soul Finder I get. I bet you I could open it up, and freaking Carly's in there, just cause. Don't even
Father
need a
Blatty.
reason. It's a shared universe.
I mean that's one thing that I love that. So Doug created the character of Father Redder, and he's a
Mhm.
character that didn't really exist within the Common America and Black Ops universe. He's this world-weary, tired character, and I love the way Tim draws him, where he has this like little line under his eyes just to
I've
show that
noticed
he's a
that.
little bit older and a little bit tired. And so I get to use him in different ways, like when Doug allows, in like Common America 7 or in the Black Ops Soul Finder crossover, and I get to do stuff with him that I can't do with the characters that Tim and I created. And it's just so much fun to kind of play in that sandbox with, like Doug's characters and things.
Yeah,
One
I
thing that we had to
actually have
do.
noticed
Oh,
that
I'm
too.
sorry. I was
No, I
gonna
was just
say
saying
one.
I've noticed that too because I even looking in Doug's picture right now, I know this is slightly different from the normal style we usually see him in this one here because it's from one of the covers, but like he definitely what did Will Smith say in Men in Black 3? He got some city miles on his face. Like he
Yeah.
clearly got some. Like
He's
he
seen
done been
some
around the block.
stuff.
Oh yeah,
Well,
that man done seen it.
well, one of the things that we like that we take pride in is whenever we do a chapter and we plot it out, we're not actually just plotting out the chapter. We actually plot long term. So one thing that Mark and I have already established is we know how Common America eventually ends. So we know its definite conclusion, and we know these story beats that will happen along the way, and we just have to build little by little until we get there. Now, one of the things that we'd always wanted to do is Common America is essentially our playground, where it's like, this is the world where everything that Mark especially has wanted to ever write, we want to set it up to where we can get there. However, when you look at Common America at face value, it isn't that kind of superhero and tokusatsu henshin genre. So we have to use that as the facade for the book. But one thing that we've always wanted to do was touch on the supernatural. We wanted to get there eventually, but we knew it would take years to make it to that point. So I know that, you know, early on, especially with indie comics, there's always this kind of impatience where people are like, oh boy, I can't wait for the crossover between this property and this property. And I was like, that is a fool's attempt. You can't do that right away, because you don't know if the popularity of two characters are even going to gel well. In fact, most crossovers don't do that great, because people realize, like, this is not, like, that suspension of disbelief isn't there. Like, I can't see these two people meeting up. So by the time we got to the Soulfinder crossover, the good thing is now we're at a point in Carly's story where we can introduce the supernatural in a very organic way. And for people who have not read Volume 7, and for people who have, it's obviously because we have a character named Xander Ecto who can actually manipulate supernatural substances within that world. And so now we have another excuse for Father Redder to show up, because he's essentially the member of the Black Ops team. He's kind of the reservist who they call in for those types of encounters. And it's great, because we always run this by Doug, and we're like, hey, just let you know, we're bringing in Redder. He's going to be in 2 pages. We need to at least have your blessing, no pun intended, to make sure that it lines up to what you expect the character to do. Now, Mark and I have spent enough time with Doug to feel that we can do the character justice on the first try, but we always run it by him to make sure, like, we don't want to step on toes. We want to make sure that it's all kind of in sync with how your character would behave and act in this world. And so hopefully we do him justice, but I've heard Doug obviously sign off on all of this and say it's really cool, but, you know, he'll tell you that it's all just a matter of time. Now, does Carly show up in Soulfinder? To be honest, like, I think that where he is in his plot, there's not that much room for a superhero incursion into his world. However, that doesn't mean to say that, you know, Redder's not going to be like at a basilica one day, and then Carly shows up in her civilian uniform and be like, hey, Carly, like, long time no see, like, how are things going? And so his readers will get that. Go ahead.
So Doug is writing the backstory of one of our minor characters from Common America. I don't know if it's been revealed or not, so I'm going to leave that up to Doug. There. But it is? Okay, cool. Yep. Yeah, tell him about it, Doug.
Yeah, so as they were talking about where it organically fits in, that's one of the things early on when we were talking about it, and we were like, we don't want to just be like, oh, that'd be cool if Father Redder and Carly were together just because or whatever. And it was like, no, it has to make sense. So for the Soulfinder Volume 4, which takes place in Vietnam, that will be the origin of Father Crane, but also Father Blatty, when they were both on a team that is inspired by the Vietnam tunnel rats. So they're essentially tasked to go on a mission with an embedded Soulfinder with them. And both men at that point in time, Father Blatty, kind of spoilers, kind of, he's more like a non-denominational Christian, or maybe like with the founding fathers, where I think I've said before, like Thomas Jefferson sort of X'd out all the supernatural stuff, but he liked everything else. And then Father Crane was more of like an agnostic atheist. And then that their experience on this mission with this Soulfinder changes the trajectory of both of their lives. So it's just been a really cool working relationship. It's cool that Tim and Mark are both friends, but then we're also able to work together on a professional level for so many years now, and like not have it implode. like happens. You see like
Yeah.
you know in other industries and even
Trust me,
comic books. And
I know that personally, so I'm really glad to know that. I mean that hasn't caused any static or anything between you guys.
No,
Yeah,
I mean we all kind of trust each other, and it's like so when Doug did Father Blatty's whole backstory, you know, Father Blatty was introduced in Common America Volume 2, and it was one of those really just absolute coincidences because I couldn't think of a good name for Father Blatty. I just needed a name for Carly's Catholic priest, you know, and so I came up with a placeholder name of Blatty after the creator of The Exorcist. And we ended up just not changing that name. And then so we came up with the idea that, oh, well, you know, his name is Father Blatty, you know, Blatty from The Exorcist. Maybe he was a soul finder, and that became a joke in the Soul Finder Black Ops crossover. And then Doug ran with it as, you know, Blatty's backstory in Soul Finder 4, and it was great. And it all just kind of, I don't know, it was so intuitive, and we all just trust each other with each other's characters. And Doug did a great backstory for Blatty. It's just, you know, it all just kind of like worked out.
Yeah, real quick, I do want to know that those end up being some of the best things where you're just bullshitting at some point and you just throw something in there. Either it could be like a placeholder or just as a joke, and then it just ends up spiraling into something that's just absolutely out of this world. Like it's great in general. I love whenever I listen to you guys talk about how much you plan and seeing things unravel. You can see it, but like back in the day, I remember picking up Common America 1 and 2 for the first time, imagining that it would get here. I had no way of conceiving it, but looking back, it's like, oh, and you see all that work and laying, everything had to eventually walk. Everything had to start off walking and crawling for y'all to run. Because like you were saying, if you just came out the gate and were like, okay, issue 2 is when Misha gets possessed, and then that's when Father Blatty has to do an exorcism on the fly, and then here comes this random chopper that drops out the Black Hops crew, and then that would have been terrible, purely because there was no setup, and we haven't gotten a chance to get to know. It's almost, you took like the OG Avengers approach where you did the slow burn, build over time, let everyone have their own moments and their own series and stuff. But when the time does come to bring stuff together, that's when we all have that, oh shit moment. Like I still remember like in the big 3-way crossover when everything started going down towards the end, I was like, good God, like I never, reading these things individually, if you had told me one day they was all gonna converge, like, yeah, it makes so much sense now, but I'm so glad that y'all did take the time to do the proper setup and to wait and not just rush out and just be like, blah, just do all the stuff. You didn't do the kids playing in the sandbox thing, but
holding your tongue can be the hardest part, you know, when you read a review and someone's like I don't get this, and you're like, well, we do, but we're thinking a year ahead, and you'll get it too, but you got to hold on for 1 year, and then you'll get there, you know, like, kind of just have to like hold your tongue. You're like, oh,
it's like the worst like Christmas feeling.
if you remember Animaine, it's like with Common America Volume 4. When actually you could say it was the ending of Common America Volume 3 with the reveal of who Vermilion Masquerade is, there was this kind of oh crap moment where people were like, but were there hints? And I was like, yeah, you can actually read through the previous 3 volumes and you can see, but that was a 2-year payoff. Like we had to just bite our tongues and be like, just trust us. Like we know, I don't want to say we know what we're doing, but we know where our story is going. And with Common America Volume 8, which is going to be coming out, I mean, it's finished, it's already been printed, but once people see its conclusion, we hope that the reaction is like that times 2, because now people are going to go back and be like, oh man, like they foreshadowed this like over 4 volumes, but they didn't tell anyone. And just spoiler for people listening, there was one guy out there and he was like, I think I pieced it all together. This is how it ends. And I showed it to Mark, and he's like, oh, we got one like pretty smart cookie out there.
Yeah.
And,
don't retweet that because
we didn't retweet it
because
I was just like, nah, that guy figured it out. But that way he'll get to the end and be like, oh my gosh, I called it. Like I can't believe it. It's like, yeah, you did. And we like rewarding people who, we like rewarding the astute reader, but at the same time, we always write our books kind of anthologically and episodically, where you can read each one by itself, and it's fine if you don't pick up on like the cues that are in there, but we think it's going to be rewarding once you make it to the end, and then you can go right back through time, start rereading, and be like, oh man, they spelled it out, like if you keep up with it.
Yeah.
Over time.
Absolutely.
But thinking about it, like going back to the crossover, that took 5 volumes of Common America, 4 volumes of Black Ops, and 2 volumes of Soul Finder. So you're looking at 11 volumes of work to get there. That was not done over the course of like months. That was done over the course of years. And one of the things that we did was, I like Easter eggs because I'm able to fill backgrounds in kind of a really fun way. But we always take the time to be like, we don't know if we're going to use it, but let's go ahead and put that in there just so we can come back and say that we had seeded that thought. And I mean, like, you want to talk about crossovers, like in Volume 1, the first time we see Carly wearing civilian wear, she's wearing a t-shirt that says Steepleton on it. So you already had 1 or 2 readers who were like, oh, that's a reference to Soul Finder. And it's like, yeah, it is. But in my mind, it's not just a reference. It means that it exists in that world. It reminds me of, I don't know if we mentioned it on this stream or someone else's, but I remember when I was a kid, we were watching Batman Forever, and there's a scene where Val Kilmer's talking to Chris O'Donnell, so it's Bruce Wayne talking to Robin, and he's like, hey, you gonna leave this early? He's like, yeah, I gotta go. And it's like, you do know Metropolis is like 3 hours away, right? And as a kid, I was like, oh man, that's so cool, because they're acknowledging that like Metropolis exists, which means that in that world, Superman has to exist. So it's like we want to put enough information there so that our readers who are keeping track of all of this, they're like, oh, so they've intimated that in this world, that possibility is out there. And we try to do that as much as possible whenever there's space in our book. Sometimes there's not, because there's just not, wherever the action is taking place, there's just not enough room for that. But we try as much as we can to seed those thoughts in there.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Just as I know from my own experience as a writer, that one of the hardest feelings in the world is the pacing and the holding of the tongue, because when you put this issue out, sometimes it can be the most minute detail. I actually put something in there for one of my books, because for one of my characters, I decided that, after some feedback, some audience feedback, and just my own mind changing, I decided I was gonna do like a costume change. But I'm like, I don't want to just necessarily spring it on people in upcoming issue, so I wrote something in there that basically says, without straight up saying, that she's gonna be in a different outfit. So for brand new people who are jumping on the next time she shows up, if they don't go back and read that old stuff, they're just gonna see her in the new dope outfit, and that's fine. But for the people who remember, oh no, because in this chapter she kicked off her shoes and said, yeah, this is why I lost the fight, because the shoes were too heavy, and then her friend was cracking on her, and then so she just has a whole new outfit. Oh.
And you've got to, it's so frustrating because you got to trust in the not just, I'm not going to say the intelligence of the readers, but the readers who will go back and reread, the earlier issues. Not every reader will do that. One are just like 1 month at a time. It's almost like it's disposable with books.
Right.
You've got to kind of like hope that they will go back and retread the previous area and see that. It's like planting a time bomb. Like we did that in Common America 1. Where he planted this little letter, and it's such a minute detail. I know it says Office of the Coroner sticking out of the pile of letters, and it's just like you had to be paying attention to see that, but it pays off in the next volume where Carly finds that letter and reads it, and then everything comes together. But it's such a small thing, and you've got to just hope that your readers are going back and they're kind of like, paying attention and going over all the little details. And occasionally you get like reviews from the readers who don't do that, and it feels very frustrating, but realistically not every reader is going to do that, so you understand and you just make your peace with it.
And there's some reviews where they didn't read carefully and they complain about something where they're just literally wrong. They're objectively wrong about something.
Those are my favorites.
And then you're just like, do I say something? Do I not? Is it worth it? Is this going to start a fight?
They bought your book, you know? It's like, how can I can't be mean to them. They paid the money, they bought the book, they wrote a review, even if they're wrong, you know, they were still a customer. I can't say something mean to them, you know, but at the same time they're wrong.
Yeah, that's been one of the hardest things for me because before I started doing the books, I was essentially critiquing the industry and critiquing writers. And then once I started doing the books and then I started seeing reviews for my own work on there, and I was just like, don't become the thing that you hate.
It is so humbling, isn't it? It's like, I had that site, TMNT Entity, and I ran that for 10 years, where every day I posted a review of a Ninja Turtles comic going all the way back to 84, and I would say, like, nasty things, critical things, really, really mean things about these comics, and they were all my honest opinions. And then I started publishing my own comics, and then I started reading reviews of my comics, and people would publish nasty things and mean things and things that were flat out wrong. And I'm like, well, if I had the freedom, you know, to say in my reviews of other people's comics, then they have the freedom to say things about my comics. You know, I can't, I can't fault them for that. You know, I can't take back my reviews, so I shouldn't ask them to take back their reviews. And it's just a humbling thing where you have to kind of like take a step back and like, yeah, you know, like that's people have the right to say whatever they want.
They have the right. They have the right to be wrong. They have the right to be mean and all that. I listened to like a audio review. I got my first audio review for one of my things, and the guy that did it, like, kudos to him for doing it. But I was just listening to that, and I'm about halfway through the review. I'm like, bro, did you even read the book that I wrote? Because I don't know what was going on this page. It said in the panel on the... Okay. I was so ready to write him like a whole DM, just airing his ass out. I'm like, Animaine, he didn't have to do the review at all. He didn't... It some things he said, it was fair. Other stuff, I just felt like he read with like half of one eye open. But at the end of the day, it's like, what are you gonna do if you get bent out of shape out of everything that they get wrong? You know, it's kind of like we were talking before we got on stream. It's like you'll just be mad forever. But this actually brings us to one of the things I wanted to ask you guys, pretty ironically, because you all at this point, you have what was it again, Tim? 11 issues total of all the different books.
If you take Soul Finder and Common America and Black Ops, let me count. It's a lot. So right now we're on 8 volumes of Common America. We are on 6 volumes of Black Ops. So that alone is 14. You add Doug Ernst's Soul Finders, volumes 1, 2, and 3. That's 15. You add Warcry, that's 16. You add Noctis Terrari, which is coming out soon, 17. And you add, well, let's not add volume 4 because he's just in development right now. That's still 17 volumes. That's a lot. That's not even including Wall Might. Yeah, it's not even that. Like Wall Might, if you include that and consider that as part of canon, let's go ahead and do that. That's 3 volumes.
Okay.
That's 20 volumes of work between 3 people, and that's 20 volumes in less than 6 years.
That is absolutely astounding. Absolutely astounding.
And that's between, let's just say 4 people, because that's me, Doug, Mark, and then Matt Weldon. It's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. But that's one of those things where, you know, we have our critics and it's fine. But the one thing that it does irk me is when people are I can't believe when people would say this, but they'll say like, well, Tim is lazy because he's too busy doing this and this behind the scenes instead, and he should just focus on his work. I was like, how am I not focusing on my work when I put in so many hours a day and I do everything that's the mechanical process? I do all the artwork, I do all the lettering, I do all the coloring, and I run the logistics of it. That's not to say that Mark's contribution isn't there, but Mark is essentially the brain because he's the one who comes up with the script. And, you know, one thing that we've always talked about is, I think one thing that makes Iconic kind of stand out is there's a really good symbiotic relationship between artists and writers. We don't have this whole debate of, who's the most important? Is it the artist or the writer? It's like, Well, I would say it's the writer, but I'm pretty sure Mark would say it's the artist. Like, I think that mutual understanding shows that, like a human body, you got to have your brain and your heart. You can't operate lacking one. They're both essential.
Exactly.
But I mean, the work is there. I don't have time for much of anything outside of working on the books. And it's like, oh, really? Where's the proof? The proof is in 20 volumes of work in
I mean,
6 years.
So I'm writing Common America 9 right now, and there are pages where I'm like, all right, I'm up to 6 panels. Do I want to put this on Tim? Do I really want to ruin Tim's day by putting 6 panels to him, you know? I think about, like, how much hard work, like, Tim has to put in, you know, to draw all the bullcrap that I'm writing, you know? Like, I'll put in a panel description, and I'll have, like, 50 different things going on in one panel. Like, oh, God, Tim's got to draw that. Well, good luck, Tim. Godspeed, you know?
Man, but that's even hearing that part. And we've talked, I think, a little bit in past streams about you guys' your creative relationship and how, like, I know at one point you were like, the way you have things so finely tuned that, like, you write stuff and you know at certain points, like, Tim's gonna look at it, send back the notes, you'll do the adjustment in the page thing, and you send it back to him, and then here you go, this part here. So even the fact that you have that so well done, that's a key reason how y'all got to 20 volumes in under 6 years. Because let me tell you something, I'm not gonna turn this into a rant stream, but I've been on some teams where that cohesion was not there, and that's why I'm not on those teams anymore.
Oh, it's just not you though. Like yesterday, Mark and I were having dinner, and I was telling him that there are artists from a certain country I am not hiring anymore because occasionally, like, we have a marketing budget, and it's pretty much just going towards commissions. And I was like, Mark, within the last 2 months, I've had 3 artists from one country. None of them are related to each other. They're all late. Every single one of them. Now, I received the last one on Friday. He was 3 months late. And I said, thank you very much. And I think he wrote me back and he said, please let me know if you need any work. And I didn't reply to him, but I'm thinking, I'm never hiring anyone from your country again. Because I think it's a cultural thing. I was like, y'all, I think, have a stereotype of being late, and it shows. And when he wrote me back, like, last week, he said, oh, sorry I'm late. I just wasn't feeling inspired. I'm like, there's some days where I'm not feeling inspired, but the work has to get done. And I see the debate all the time on social media. Like, a lot of artists, especially Americans, they're like, well, I hate it when this guy, like, basically bullied me because look at this DM. Like, he's bugging me for the work. Like, where's the work? And I'm like, bruh, I have a life outside of this, you know? Like, be patient. I was like, I have never received a late piece of art from a Japanese artist. Not once in 3 years that I've been commissioning Japanese artists. They've never been late. Never given me excuses. And I was like, guess what? I don't give excuses either. Like, I've been working in merchandising for a decade. I have always made a deadline. Like, doesn't matter if I'm sick, doesn't matter if I'm not feeling well, always made it. And, you know, I'm going to go on a little rant, but we've talked about it with Doug, with Mark, but I said one of the things, and I think this is kind of why I don't do a lot of cultural commentary anymore, is because I do feel like the arts, and maybe comics in general, I really do think there's a cancer where it manifests symptomatically no matter what side you fall on. And it's this kind of mentality where it's like, I'll get to it when I get to it. I was like, bruh, like, Mark and I, we have a schedule that we adhere to, and our readers like it, and they look forward to it. They're like, oh boy, I know I'm going to get at least 2 books a year, 3 if you include Black Ops. We know they're going to be punctual. We know they're going to be on time. We always have something to look forward to. And I was like, I think that a lot of times, one of the things that sets us apart from independent comics is, like, when we say we're going to do something, you can bet your bottom dollar that it's going to get done. And we don't mess around when it comes to this type of thing. Everything has to be a well-oiled machine. And I know Doug's like that because with him working with Matt Weldon, we're gonna goof on Matt a little bit. Matt is like he's like a manatee or a whale. When he says he's gonna do something, he's like, adios, Doug, I'm off to work on your book. Psh! And he goes into the depths, and Matt's like, and Doug is like, Matt, where are you? And I'm like, he's gone, Doug. He's gone to work on Soul Finder. You might see him again in a month, but be patient. And so, like, sure enough, I'm like, Doug, when do you say he'd get this page to you? It's like, he said he'd get it to me by tomorrow. I was like, tomorrow, he will resurface. You will see him again. And so we work very punctually and very schedule oriented. And we trust each other to do that. But it's not easy. And it's a miracle that over time, we've just kind of had to learn from trial and error, kind of like, okay, this guy can get the work done on time, this guy is a little bit slow. But that's the sad thing about working in comics, as far as like dealing with our peers and our associates. It's kind of heartbreaking, but you're gonna have a lot of people you are not going to gel with, and that's okay. You just have to either cut them out or learn to deal with it, and manage those expectations wisely.
Absolutely. And I think that actually it is what sets you guys apart, not just both from a consumer and a creator standpoint. And that is something I'm starting to notice as time goes on. As I don't even like just saying like the indie comics scene, because in reality it's like a bunch of different intersecting and conflicting scenes that just happen to be like on the same corners of the internet for the most part, kind of. But like the ones I think that end up standing the test of time, like a lot of the ones that go like one or two campaigns or a few issues, versus like you guys that have, how you now have this whole library of work, the ones who have like the artistic passion but also are really about that business mindset, that work ethic mindset, where they don't just treat it as like this. Like you may have seen like a lot of people talking about the whole starving artist complex lately, which is something I absolutely abhor. I always use this quote by you guys know Customato.
Yep.
Yeah, there's this quote about professionalism that I just learned from him last year. It is now one of my life mantras. I just pulled it up just to make sure I get it right. He said, "A professional is a professional in the way that he thinks, feels, and in his ability to execute under the most trying conditions. I believe a man is a professional when he can do what needs to be done, no matter how he feels within. An amateur is an amateur in his attitude emotionally." I feel like that just punctuates what you guys just said. You guys, even though this is not your main job, technically this is y'all's side hustle, but because y'all are professionals just in the way you execute, that means that if y'all say y'all gonna have 2 books out or 3, it's gonna be 3 books out. If the next chapter of Common Academy drop every Wednesday at such and such, whatever else is going on in y'all personal life or whatever, anything that got to happen to make sure that when whatever time hit on Wednesday, that Common America joint or that Common Academy thing is out and the public can read it, that's just what's going to happen. Whatever sickness, whatever personal feelings you got, like, because either this thing going to happen or it's not. Either you going to get the stuff out on time or you're not. Either you going to keep
My
delivering on your
dysentery
promise
never
to
gets
your...
in the way of Common Academy.
See,
Yeah, I was
and
just talking
that-
to my wife earlier. I don't know if it's like a generational thing, but she was talking about someone at work who didn't call in and was a like no show, and then showed up on work on Monday like no big deal. And I was like, when I was working in DC at the Heritage Foundation, I was puking all over the place, and I still called my boss on the phone to let her know that, hey, I'm next to the toilet, I'm puking, and she was all still like mad at me. But I think when you dig into iconic comics and you look at Tim's background, Mark's, Eric Canetti, Matt, Bill Williams, you see these guys that have backgrounds in retail or jobs where you have to meet a deadline. With myself, a military background, but then at the newspaper, like you can't make excuses. So it's like you have to do what you said you're going to do, and if you don't, there's a problem. And so I think for whatever reason that we gravitated to each other, I think part of it is because we just understand that you have to do your best to be a man of your word.
I mean,
Absolutely.
when you work in the private sector, there's understood like, yes, you can take a vacation or you can take sick days, but the work doesn't go away while you're gone. It just stacks up.
Nope.
So, like you're on vacation
right
for
there
a week,
waiting for you when you
but
come back.
yeah, when you get back, there's a week worth of work waiting for you on your desk. you know. And so you think about that, like if Tim wanted to just take a week off of drawing, then he would have to do 2 weeks worth of drawing when he gets back. You know, I take a
Mm-hmm.
week worth of writing. I write 5 pages a day, and then I write the Common Academy web strips on the weekend because they're shorter. But if I took a week off of writing, like, well, then I'm going to have to write 10 pages a day. You know, like it's you think about your deadlines and you think about your workload. But you know, so after Common America 8, which is going to be coming out in like 2 weeks, so in mid-June we're going to be doing the pre-order for that. But in fall we're going to be doing Common America Black Ops Volume 6, and that's the one that is for me as a writer was one of the most complicated and kind of like anxiety-ridden things I ever wrote, because that's the ultimate chapter of the Common America X, the big crossover things that we've been building since Common America 4. So Common America 4 was Black Ops X Common America. I'm sorry, Black Ops 4 was Black Ops X Common America. Black Ops 5 was Black Ops X Common America X Soul Finder. And coming up is Black Ops 6, which is Antarctic X Iconic. So it's a whole bunch of Antarctic comics characters and a whole bunch of iconic comics characters. Just a ton of them all together in this ultimate chapter of all of the crossovers we've been building up. And I had to coordinate with a lot of other writers and artists to make sure that I was writing their characters within the parameters of how they view their characters. Like I had some uh, experience writing, like, you know, Father Redder for Soul Finder, so I worked with like Doug writing, you know, Soul Finder, but I'd never written like Versema from Punchline before, and so I coordinated with Bill Williams on that. And so Bill told me, like, this is the continuity of Versema, this is where she is in the last Punchline crossover, here is some secret script sneak peeks of where she's going to be next, so that you can coordinate your crossover within the continuity of the Punchline books. And I had to make sure that everything was coordinated with that. But then I also had like Rags from Rags Rogowski from Brian's book,
Yeah.
and I had to make sure that that was coordinated. I had a little bit of experience of that because Brian had been writing a Black Ops crossover with Rags recently, so I was able to review his scripts on how he was writing Penelope and USAGI and everything, but I had to make sure that those characters coordinated with that. And so Black Ops 6 coming up this at the end of the year was a really, really complicated thing to write. But we wanted to make sure we did it correctly and that we did everybody's characters justice. And so we coordinated with a whole bunch of different creators, including a few that are going to be a surprise. So I haven't named them yet, but you'll see them in the book. And it was a lot of fun, but it was a ton of work. And you don't always, as the reader, you don't see all the work that goes on behind the scenes. It's like when you walk into a really nice building, you don't see the blueprints and all the architecture that went into building that building. You just look up and like, wow, that's really pretty. You know, like when you read a comic, you're like,
slight little half tangent. It's ironic you say that because my fiance and I, we were going out furniture hunting today, and we went to this this place called, well, I'm not gonna name it, but like we went to this spot that we had just got recommended. Like they got everything, you can go in there and get it for dirt cheap. And we went in there and it was dirt cheap. We're like, man, this place is so good, man. It's broken in here. Like it's OP, it's broken. And then I look around and there's holes in the wall and the tile is coming off the ceiling. I'm like, oh, this shit literally broken in here. Okay. Like, god dang. Like, I'm still probably gonna buy the stuff, but I want to come inside here as little as possible because I should not be seeing the inside wiring of the wall while I am relieving myself in the bathroom. That should not happen. But yes,
now on the other hand, if that were a restaurant, you know the food was going to be great.
Right, exactly. I mean, hey, they say hole in the wall joints are the best, right? Well, there you go, literal. I mean, you can't get more hole in the wall than that, so win-win. But I really like the points you're making, and I feel like as someone who's been more of a reader than a writer for most of my life, I think about all those moments where it's a huge culmination of something, whether it's a plot point that's finally paying off, or a big crossover story. And you're right, like we don't really see all the behind the scenes stuff, but that just means y'all did y'all damn job, and you did it very, very well. Like we see it, and we're reading it feeling like all these characters were always intended to be together from jump, even though the fact that this is two completely different universes colliding it together, like that's obviously not the case. Like you didn't start like no one submitted the first character design of Carly or Father Redder, and y'all knew, oh, one day there will be an Armageddon plot and everything will be on the fate of the world and they'll all be running in to fight together each other. That made sense in some universe, not this one, but it's fine. But I just think it's really dope. It show you guys skill, dedication. It shows that your methodology and everything, it's paying off. Gonna slight deviation, but still in this real quick, we are getting up to the hour mark, but there's something that I had to throw onto the docket. I wanted to get you guys take on it, seeing as how you guys are. I'd say it's fair to call you guys indie veterans at this point. Would you disagree?
I don't know. I mean, we've only been going at it for 6 years, which makes us kind of babies. But I mean, we've definitely been around the block. That's for sure.
Time's fine.
Okay. Fine. Okay. But I did want to get you guys' take on this thing. It's something that pops up a lot. I see discussed a lot. I've weighed in on it a few times because we talk a lot about what you guys are constantly working on, what you've done, what you're doing. But you've also touched on this real quickly earlier, how you guys don't have time for YouTube anymore. Doug, I know you used to do a lot of like the more commentary stuff, but you just said now you just peek in to check with your readers pretty much.
Right.
So when it comes to a lot of the whole like culture war discussion stuff, you've kind of just left that to the new kids on the block and the old guard that's still here. So like you're just basically you're doing your thing in your lane with your books, with your fans, and the other stuff just kind of just happens out there.
Part of it is like we've gotten some criticism because people are like, oh well, Mark and Tim turned tail the moment they started working on Common America. Like they don't want to touch the Trump stuff anymore. And I'm like, no, we don't touch it because he's not in office anymore. I mean, it's a very simple answer. Like right. someone was like, oh, they changed because I told them. I told them that they're not supposed to be doing those books, and they took my advice. You're welcome. I was like, no, we were doing those books up until the year of the election, and then he lost. And well, I'm not gonna go into that argument, but the reality is like, could you imagine if we still did those books? Like, it wouldn't make sense. It would be almost like anachronistic. And people are like, well, but Common America is not a political book. And it's like, well, it hasn't been a political book since we debuted it in the spring of 2020. Like, if you look at the first volume, it's just not a political book. So Black Ops isn't a political book either. And we've been working on that since 2017. So for some reason, people just think like, well, I'm shocked that they're not continuing like commentary into culture war. It's like, well, part of it is that one, there's no place for it in Common America or Black Ops. I think we touch on it with a light motif, but one thing that we've always done is it's like we write it in a way where we feel like it should be perennial. Like for example, right now in the second saga, they're combating kind of like the dark suits and this idea of like light pollution. Well, light pollution is kind of a real thing, but it's not like at the forefront of people's minds. It's just a substitute for, think of any global catastrophe that has occurred in the last 30 or 50 years that people get hyperventilated about, whether it be like the hole in the ozone layer, global warming, global cooling, you name it.
Acid rain.
Acid rain.
Exactly.
It's like 100 years from now, you should be able to read it and be like, oh, this is a general analogy for just whatever the latest thing is that people are getting hyped and overworked about. That's it. Like, I think that's the only real political statement that we're making with the book. So it's not that we don't have our own opinions. I mean, people can ask me privately and I'll kind of just talk about it. It's just that for where we're trying to focus at the moment, there's just no room for it. And just getting the feedback from a lot of our readers, they seem to appreciate it because it's like you're able to succeed with the work alone without any of the culture war commentary attached to it. Like,
Right.
just since we've been doing it, there's never been a time where it's like, oh, we're the victim. Please back our book. Like, we're the ones who are being the aggrieved here. It's like, no, buy the book because you like it. I really don't care if you don't like me or Mark or whoever we might associate with. I think the proof is in the pudding. They're buying it because there's something about the work that resonates with them, whether it be something deeply felt or whether it be superficial where it's like, no, I like it because it amuses me. That's fine.
Right.
So I mean, Common America and Black Ops, etc., they're not branded as part of a culture war or as part of a movement, but we put in our feelings and our intentions into the narrative. We weave that in, and if people interpret it, that way, then that's what we intended. It's kind of like you watch the movie like The Exorcist, right? And no one has ever branded The Exorcist as a pro-Catholic movie or a Catholic propaganda movie, but it is a movie where the Catholic Church intervenes and drives a demon out of a little girl and saves her life, but no one says that that's a pro-Catholic propaganda movie. That's just part of the narrative. We have like
Exactly.
our messages and our plots within Common America, but they aren't, we don't brand them as, a culture war or a pro this or a pro that. It's just part of our storyline. They're our characters. Some of them are Christians, some of them attend church, some of them do this and some of them do that. And it's just part of that narrative and part of that world and part of who our characters are. And if people interpret it and internalize it, in certain ways, then that's part of just the intuitive narrative of the
It's
stories.
that's one of the things. Every once in a while, I'll see someone refer to either our books or Iconic and say, "Oh, they write quote unquote conservative books," and I'm like, "Okay, tell me you've never read one of our books without telling me you've never read any of our books."
Right.
Like, yes, I am a conservative Catholic man, but my books, it really kind of bothers me when people say that they're just conservative books, because it's like, no, I'm by vocation, I'm a writer and I take writing seriously, and I know Mark and Tim take writing seriously, and I don't want to write ham-fisted the equivalent of Sean Hannity stories for Iconic Comics. Like, I would be embarrassed if that's what I was doing. I want to write stories that 10 years from now people will read it and be like, hey, that's a really cool book about some combat exorcists.
There was a
Exactly.
guy, I think it's the only time I goofed on this guy on Twitter, because I normally just refrain, but this guy, honestly, he's so intellectually bereft that he actually uses his real name as opposed to anonymity. I know like Brian Ball had his interactions with him, but you can tell this guy's never read our work because every now and then, I think he's off his meds and he goes on the attack. And so like the other day, he was like, I've read Common America. It's nothing but conservative propaganda. And yet, like 5 weeks before, he was like, I've read Common America. It could be any character and she never does anything patriotic. I'm like, but which is it? Because
Pick a lane. Pick a
pick a
struggle.
lane. By her being patriotic, that assumes that she is, quote unquote, classically conservative. So it's obvious that you're not the type of person who's arguing from a good faith perspective because you've actually read the book. It's very clear, actually,
Well,
that the opposite is true.
We had this
Exactly.
review recently, and it was from a foreign reader, but they had read Common America Volume 1, and they read the part where Carly's father says that a lot of people are going to tell you what you should be, but you know what you are, and that's what means the most. And they re-internalize that as being pro-LGBT and trans propaganda. And like, that's not what we meant at all.
No,
Okay.
I talked to Mark about it. I was like, where in the world is this take coming from? Like,
I just
that's a wild take.
I just want to understand. I didn't know that we were living in actual like the Marvel universe, and Mr. Fantastic is just out here writing reviews because these stretches are just insane.
Well, and that's
fucking insane.
the danger of like, I guess the part where we have to tread carefully is we're trying to make very general moral statements that we feel like the average sane person will see at face value and just internalize as this is just nothing more than a PSA when we were kids.
Yeah.
Like don't do drugs. I mean, you're not gonna refer to that as, oh, they're anti-Benadryl. It's like that's not what that means. Like that means that don't do stuff that negatively affects your health for the purpose of recreation is essentially what that means. I shouldn't have to spell that out, but it's like when we say there's peer pressure out there where people are going to try and tell you this. The moral of the story is don't do that. You got to know yourself. That's who you are. But I just think maybe it's a byproduct of just the world we're living in, but in a way it's a byproduct of quote unquote the culture war, because they're almost seeing too much into it, where they're like, oh, well, that's a propaganda thing. It's like, no, it wasn't. That was not the point.
Yeah, there's no point, because everything is so charged. We've made it so that we can't just sit and enjoy stuff. Like, something is always going to be interpreted through a lens of, well, was this the message? Is this the writer? Are we seeing the writer here? Or like, and I can say, as someone who is more classically liberal, slightly progressive, I read your books and I never feel like I'm having any conservative anything shoved down my throat. I mean, knowing a bit about who you guys are, I can understand how your ideals or your worldview or just your experiences have influenced what you put in the book, whether it be implicit or explicit. But I never feel like it's the conservative book. Like, it's common America. This is how she feels. Like, the most I think I've ever felt like, not heavy, but where it was almost like okay, this is a slight soapbox moment, was like at the end during the climactic scene in like Common America 4, when Carly was laying into Vicky. I'm like, okay, I can kind of see that a little bit here, but like it wasn't bad, and it was in character and it fit the moment. So at the end of the day, it didn't even matter.
I'll tell you the irony about that speech though, because we try to extrapolate from the real world, kind of like, hey, do you remember when this happened? Like, something that maybe happened in our personal lives. It's like, how do we condense that? Because there's a moral in that moment. And the irony about it was a lot of people who were right-leaning, who were always like, I'm the victim. Like, please make me richer. Like, tune into my channel and give me more money. And I'm like, you're not a victim. Like, if you're paying attention, you know that you're not. If I was like in the position where I was, pretty high on my own pedestal and making a lot of money, I'd be like, it doesn't matter if someone's attacking me. I'm not a victim. I'm doing pretty well, and I'm doing peachy keen for myself. So that's kind of the irony, is that even in something like that, it's like I can kind of see how people might be thinking that in a soapbox moment we would be referring to like one side or the other, but we're not. I mean, it's literally like,
and that's the beauty of it.
We have to write it in a way where it speaks universally to any side of the spectrum. The irony about it is that the only politics that are really in the book are, you gotta like America. That's literally pretty much it, because it's like, I don't care if you're a Democrat from New York who, you might vote left, but you still love the red, white, and blue. You're gonna like the book because I don't know how you describe it. It's almost like Spider-Man New Yorkers. These are like tough talking stereotypes, but like in the end of Spider-Man, where like the whole
city unites to like
the whole and
get out of Green Goblin because he's endangering the kids.
Yeah, it's like, you attack one of us, you attack all of us.
If we had one philosophy that I could say that was some of Common America, it's that be the America that Japan thinks you are. And that's what we want to be. And that goes for everything. It's like, what do you think of when you think of France? You think of the Eiffel Tower, you think of a bunch of people like playing like accordions or whatever, and mimes, and you think of like, and everyone riding bikes and smoking cigarettes and wearing striped shirts and berets and with baguettes and cheese and stuff, but you have this image in your head of what France is, and it may not be what France really is. If you were to go to Paris and you'd find a bunch of mosques, and you find a bunch of things that just are not Paris. There's an actual medical condition called Paris syndrome, where you have an idea of a place and then you go there and reality doesn't match your idea and you have a complete mental breakdown. But you know what Paris is, and Japan has this idea of America. It's the America that we all wish we would like to be. It's the white picket fences and holding up the American flags and be like, yeah, America, f yeah, and and like barbecuing out in the backyard and setting off fireworks and everything. And that's the America that we wish we were, and that's the America that Japan thinks we are. And that's the America that we would like to represent in our characters, that ideal of America. And that's what we put in Common America is the ideal is. We don't always meet that ideal. We're imperfect. We can't always live up to our expectations, but we always try.
Well, and it's like our for example, like watching anime and manga, you'll notice certain tropes that Japan has. Now, as a rational-minded person, I know like that's not the case. I'm pretty sure you have crime in Japan. I'm pretty sure that not everyone is always smiling all the time and happy. But even in their culture, when they depict themselves in anime and manga, they depict their good side, and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I think that's part of the charm of their cartoons and their books coming from there is. They put on a really good face. And I think every country should do that. I think that you should try and depict culturally your good side whenever you're presenting yourself to another nation or another country or another people. And me, personally, if I were to travel to Japan, I would be a very typical tourist where it's like, show me this, because this is what I see in the media. I know it's not completely real, but just humor me, because I really do think that this is what they want us to see. And same thing when, like, it was funny because one of our readers, he loves WrestleMania. He loves American wrestling. And so I saw that he went to WrestleMania a few months ago, and I wrote to him on Twitter, and I was like, I saw you were in LA for like a week and a half. How was it? And his reply was, it was everything I wanted it to be. And I didn't say anything, but I was like, it means you had a really good tour guide, because he showed you what you wanted to look at. And kudos to him, because I'm glad, because I know, like, I've been to LA. I have relatives who live in that area. It is not like what you think it is. I mean, there's a lot of crime, a lot of negativity in there, but whoever he was with was like, I'm going to make sure and show this guy a good time. We're going to go to WrestleMania. We're going to eat some good food. I'm going to take him to the beach. I'm going to take him to these really touristy areas where it's nothing but surf, sand, like beautiful women, just everything you think of when you think of America, so that he has the best time he can have. That's what we want with Common America, is it's like, she is supposed to depict what, in our mind, the good face. And so when people want to criticize us and maybe be like, well, that's not the America I know. Like, the America I know is it sucks, is this and this. It's like, don't get me wrong, but America's not great because of its flaws. It's great in spite of them. Why would I want to show you all the stuff that I know are pretty negative? I want people to feel good when they read our work. I want people to feel pride in knowing that we're creating a hero that we hope resonates with people, not only based on her morals, but because of some of the more patriotic elements of her. I mean, the flag would be meaningless if we didn't have that in the book.
Damn, man, it's kind of hard to follow that up, but I'm gonna try. Yeah, but I agree 100%. I think that one of the things that makes your books, really all of them, but in particular Common America, stand out is that you can have these values and you can have these ideals and these morals, but you do it in a way where you're not saying, I don't know if y'all remember the movie, what was that Chris Rock movie where he was head of state? It was back when Chris Rock was doing like 5 movies a year, some crazy shit. But anyway, his running mate, or not his running mate, the person he was running against was like, he had this stupid slogan. It was like, God bless America and no place else. I feel like when people have like the boogeyman conservative in their mind, that's what they imagine. And you're just someone who like, yeah, you have pride in the place that you're from, and you're putting forth, you're like in a sort of Captain America sort of way, where you're like, this is the spirit of the best aspects of this country, but it's something that anyone can pick up and enjoy. Like, you're not saying, no, here's common America and America's all that matters. I mean, that's literally impossible, because half the team ain't even from damn America, so that's already nixed out. But like, I don't know, it's just strange, and it is unfortunately an aspect of this godforsaken culture war. And I barely even interact with the culture war, because I'm to the point now where I only involve myself in the war because I want to help bring about its end, so that we can all get back to enjoying anime titties and Misha feet and kaiju battles and stuff like that. Like, I'm so tired of constantly talking about, is this or is this not woke, is this or is this not anti-woke, does this have a message? Bro, I just want to read it and watch it and enjoy it, or critique it on its merit, not the politics of the people who made it and whether or not they're just trying to appeal to a fan. I don't care. I just want to read the good stuff.
That's why I watch horror movies, because they don't have any message at all. It's just people getting stabbed to death.
There's actually kind of like an overarching theme with a lot of the iconic comics properties is, I think aside from maybe, well, Mark and Doug, I've seen them opine occasionally on Twitter, but the work is typically not presented as a vanguard of any type of culture war. The work is presented as, this is it, and if you like it, buy it. But we're not going to cast it in this light of, hey, if you want to stick it to this person or this group, make sure to support our work. Because there's that part of me that, because we can't sleep at night. Because in a way, you're like, well, they didn't buy it because they trusted us. Or they thought the writing was stellar. They bought it because they're like, well, I'm just going to give you money because I like your cause. And it's like,
right, I want to stick it to the mainstream or whatever. Want to win back the culture. That actually, this is a good place to leave off at, because this circles around to something else I wanted to run by you guys. What do you think of, and I don't know if you've even heard this or paid attention to this argument, but what do you think of people who basically they have the attitude of, in order to change things around, we all have to divert our attention from, say, the mainstream and all about face and just dive in on indie comics, so that we can, win the culture back?
Oh man, I have a very succinct reply to that. If the work is not good, it does not deserve your money. Bottom line. I hate to say it, but in 6 years of supporting some creators and supporting different books, I honestly, not a lot of it is very impressive, because it's like, no, this is the alternative. It's like, cool, I have $10, let me give it to you. It's like, okay, I got the book. I was like, let's see if this creates any waves. And I look and I'm like, grammar and spelling errors, no editor, you don't even have my attention by page 4. Wow, this is just like a rehash of this plot from this thing. I'm sorry, but in order to make waves, I firmly believe that what you do is support what is genuinely good, reject what is genuinely bad, and it has nothing to do whether it's an independent or a mainstream. For example, when we were having dinner the other day, I told Mark, I said, I kind of ran out of stuff to watch, so I was just pulling out old Disney DVDs from like the 90s and early 2000s. So I was watching like Ratatouille, which I haven't seen in 20 years. I was watching Tarzan, Hunchback of Notre Dame, Hercules. Like, things were, even at the time, they were not considered good movies. And because a lot of times they were comparing them to like The Lion King, Aladdin, whatever.
Right.
And I was like, holy cow, the first like 8 minutes of The Hunchback of Notre Dame is easily better than like everything I watched in the last year. Like, it's so good. And it's like, it's a mainstream thing. There's people who'd be like, no, you don't touch it at all. And it's like, no, because it's good. It is meritorious for what it is. I mean, as a Catholic, I go back to St. Thomas Aquinas, who at one point he was asked, well, Thomas Aquinas, what about other religions? Like, what about them? What part of the truth do they say? Do we reject them wholesale? And Thomas Aquinas said, God loves everyone. He does not create any person without purpose. You find the truth and you accept it no matter where you find it. And his point was, so for example, if you take like, let's just say Japan, and you take like the Shinto religion, if they believe in an afterlife, if they believe in a kame, if they believe in spirits, that is obviously something in their religion where like the divine has touched them to the point where it's like they know that there's something else out there. Accept that. There's no reason to reject it. That's my personal opinion. It's probably why like Mark and I were talking about it, but we in secret we'd be watching like different things that we're not supposed to because it's like, no, it's part of the culture war, you don't touch it. And I'd be like, I watched it and I thought it was hilarious. And he's like, I watched it too and I actually liked it. I was like, well, we can't say anything publicly because we're not supposed to. We're gonna get crucified in the court of public opinion.
Oh
but
my
it's
gosh.
like,
Yeah.
that's my position. I know it's not a popular one, but it's like, if the work is good, doesn't matter if it's independent or if it's mainstream, accept it. If the work is bad, reject it. I don't believe in, well, you have to only support indies. Like, no. I mean, I think Doug would agree because it's like when we met 6 years ago, the entire point was tell these corporations, if you like this property, show them what you like. Reject everything that you don't like. I don't feel like that's inconsistent with how we've always talked or preached about. I think that's actually pretty consistent with how we've always kind of conducted ourselves over these years. But Doug is a pretty scholarly expert when it comes to this type of thing. So I guess I'll take his take on it over mine easily.
But I'm also not going to argue with Thomas Aquinas too much, if at all. But no, actually, recently I had a conversation with Christopher Lawrence, who does the No Heroes podcast. He has on YouTube, and we were talking about the Top Gun movie. Hopefully, this wasn't off air, but he was like, like I'm not sure whether I should see the Top Gun movie or not. What do you think? And I was like, I've heard nothing but really good things about it. Because he was like, I don't know if I want to support the studios. And I was just like, listen, if it's a legitimately good movie, especially if it harkens back to what we loved about the 80s movies, but it's like 2023 or whenever it came out, 2022. I feel like on a case-by-case basis, you do want to reward something like Tim was saying that's legitimately good. And so it's one of those things where you just need to, I guess going back to the Catholic thing or whatever, pray for discernment and take everything on a case-by-case basis and just really think about it. Is this good? And is this worth supporting? And I don't know. For me, it's just, I don't want to issue blanket statements and be like, I will never support anything that comes out of Marvel ever again. And it's like, no, I feel like if there are creators, writers, and artists who are behaving like professionals and they're putting out good work, I do want to reward that. But I'm also aware that I've been bitten multiple times and I'm very wary of these companies. So my wallet, I don't open it up nearly as fast as I used to.
Well, and then the other thing too is that sometimes when we have this defense, the knee-jerk reaction is like, oh, well, they're just part of that whole consume, and it's like, buddy, I have not even seen like the last 6 Marvel movies. Trust me, I already have this fatigue attached to it. So that blind consumerism is something else I reject wholesale, because typically whenever you think of consumerism, you think of the mainstream. But I'm like, well, what happens when today's indie becomes tomorrow's mainstream? It'd be no different. Let's take Common America or Soulfinder. Maybe one day Doug's Soulfinder book, just does gangbusters, and all of a sudden it is like the new hotness. I think Doug would agree that principally speaking, it's like, well, if someone comes up to Doug and is like, well, Doug, I saw the last 6 Soulfinder movies, but I didn't like the last 3 because you hired this actor. I don't think Doug would be like, well, you have to keep on watching it because you got to stick it to the man. No, I think he'd be like, if we failed in any endeavor for the work to meet your expectations, we are not deserving of your money. I mean, that's how Mark and I have approached it.
If the product is bad, don't buy the product, regardless of if it's corporate or indie. If if a comic book is bad, if it looks bad, it has bad art, bad writing, bad everything, but someone is selling it to you on the narrative of the culture war, it's like every dollar you give me is a dollar that doesn't go to Marvel or DC. And be a little suspect of that if they're trying to sell you like mud in return. And that's what some of these books are. It's like, buy what you want, Like, I don't buy any new Marvel comics because there's no new comics coming out of Marvel that I'm interested in. But what I do buy is I buy their Epic collections, which are these really nice trade paperbacks of comic books from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s they've been putting out in like a chronological order. And I've been addicted to those. And those are the Marvel that I want to read. And so I buy those. I don't buy like the crap they've been putting out now. I'm not interested in anything new Star Wars really, but there have been a re-release of the old books from the 80s and the 90s that I had never read. And so I'll go and I'll pick one up of those from like Borders and I'll read that. In terms of indie comics, like I picked up I hope he starts up like volume 3, but I picked up volume 1 and 2 of Earthworm Jim from Doug Tenaple. And there's nothing, when I read them, there is nothing in them that is culture war, quote unquote. There's a part where a character named Farmer Jim sits down to dinner and he says grace, and that's it. And the rest of the book is just an earthworm in a spacesuit fighting aliens. There's nothing like that. It's just a good fun book. And it wasn't, but that's how it was sold. It was sold as a good, fun book, an indie book, but a fun book, and it wasn't sold as part of the culture war. Like every dollar you give to Doug Tenaple isn't a dollar that goes to Marvel and DC and Dan Slott and all those weirdos. No, that wasn't how it was sold. And it was just a good book by its own merit. And you could give a copy of that book to a kid, and the kid would read it and enjoy it. There's this great comic by a Japanese creator called Diva, called Little Nuns, and I picked up volumes 1 and 2 in that. It's a pantomime comic, and it's about these nuns in a Catholic convent somewhere. It's a textless pantomime comic. They have a bunch of ducks and a bunch of chickens, and they just do these cute things in every comic, and it's great. It's not trying to sell Catholicism to anybody. It's not propaganda. It's just a bunch of cute nuns doing cute things with ducks. And it's one of my favorite comics, and I was really happy to pick up hard copies of it, from the Japanese creator. And I feel like if you want to make change, then don't sell your comic as part of the culture war. Sell it as just being a good story with good characters and a good plot, and the people who read it will internalize that, and that will create the change that you want to see in the world.
Very, very simple, but I think profound advice, unfortunately, because we are in a state where I personally think it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. I won't go off on that tangent because we'll be here another 5 hours. But...
I have a question, Animaine. You watch anime and read manga, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the weird thing is this, like, I think the reason why I and Mark too, the reason why we just don't get a lot of that engagement is because I just do nothing but watch anime and read manga. And so it's like I've found like a treasure trove of this entertainment. And so like the way I see things going is even if things get quote unquote worse, there's always everything abhors a vacuum. And as a result, you just have this influx of people who are out there across the pond who are like, well, we got the entertainment over here. Like, come here and make it. Now, let's say things get so bad that it influences that stuff too. Well, hopefully there's guys like us, Doug, me, Mark, Matt, Eric Canetti, these other creators was like, well, we're not going anywhere. Like, here's our stuff. And we're not presenting it as, well, here is like the alternative. It is, well, it's not any alternative, but it is definitely, we think, something that's meritorious for you to look at. And you make the judgment if that's something that is worthy of your dollars. In the end, just because you want an alternative, I feel like we have to make it so that it is worthy of your support and it is deserving of that money. Because, like, for example, I've had some people who have reached out to me, and maybe they'll say something like, I like your books, but I collect everything, but man, I really didn't like Volume 5, and I missed out on Volume 6. Is there any way I can get it? And I'm like, well, first of all, like, don't feel obligated to get it if you didn't like Volume 5. We have to make sure that it's something that you want. You can always wait for the omnibus, you can wait for it to go on Amazon, you can wait for it to go on Antarctic Press, but don't feel the need to stick it to the man and give us your money. If we did not meet your standards for your entertainment, trust me, it's no skin off our back, because at the end of the day, we're the ones who have to reflect back on it and say, we messed up. We thought the story didn't go where probably people wanted it to go, or it wasn't told in the way it should have been. We're the ones who have to recalibrate to make sure that, we can earn your support. That's really the bottom line at the end of the day is, hopefully, I mean, there's been a couple times, like, for example, like last week, someone was like, I love Common America because it's doing all the stuff that I wish Marvel and DC would. Well, I retweet that, not because I feel like it's a culture war thing, but I think it's a good business selling point where they're saying that, hey, Marvel and DC, like, this is the stuff that I like as far as the writing is concerned. I really do think it outshines you. I think that is not a cultural war statement. That is a objective comparison between quality. So
yeah,
I mean,
Iconic does what Nintendo don't, obviously. It's kind of no-brainer.
But yeah, I mean, I guess that's all. It's a long-winded way of saying that Iconic Comics, our work, we're proud of it. There's not that many creators under our umbrella, but I think for what we have there are people who buy everything under that canopy because they'll tell you, like, man, they're great. I mean, not only are the quality of the books that are made good, but the craftsmanship on the inside is good too, and they're not selling based on any type of rage or any type of outspoken, like, political movement or anything like that.
No agenda,
Cult
no
of
nothing.
personality.
No, definitely not cult of personality. I mean, like I said, Mark and I are, like, hardly on YouTube nowadays, so it's like, don't buy it for our glowing personality because you're not going to get it. But get it because you like the work.
Yeah, and that's, at the end of the day, I think when all the dust settles, even for a lot of the better books, unfortunately, I think because they're pushed so heavily as part of, like, the culture war thing, that some creators I think are going to end up, even if it's good work, they're going to end up pigeonholing themselves as just, like, the culture war creators. And I think it's going to be the people who can, even regardless of how they feel about stuff, that can have the work stand on its own and just be a thing. Like, I see people from all aisles, all sides of everything, no sides, people who don't even give a damn about none of this shit, love y'all stuff. And at the end of the day, I think that's so dope. And you guys, that's why you have continued to have my respect as creators, as from both a peer standpoint and from a consumer standpoint. You have my respect, because at the end of the day, what's up?
You want to see a psyop, like an absolute expert god tier psyop?
Okay.
Read Spy Family or Buddy Daddies, because those manga were done entirely to convince people to have sex and make babies, and they are absolutely killing it. I mean, the whole purpose of, like, Spy X Family and Buddy Daddies is that, like, yeah, we know you don't think you're ready to have a kid, but no one is. But when you have a kid, it'll be great and you'll love them and it'll be, like, the best experience of your life, so go ahead and have a kid. And they tell these stories that are, like, superficially about, like, spy adventures, or in Buddy Daddy's case, like, assassin and mercenary adventures, but at the core of them, it's about having a family and raising a kid that you weren't expecting to have. And it's working. Like, the Japanese population growth actually increased for the first time in, like, a few generations. And it's,
wow,
but that's the thing, is, like, they didn't sell themselves as, like, part of the, like, have sex, make babies culture. They were just sold as good stories, and those good stories permeated the culture, and now the population growth is going up in Japan. If you want to make change, tell good stories, and then people will internalize them as such.
One thing that Mark and I were talking about is, never in the last decade, if you had told me, like, hey, like, 10 years from now, most of the anime you're going to watch are, like, comfy anime about, like, I don't know, like, after school programs where you learn how to, like, build shelves, or, like, I remember when I was trying to sell Mark on Buddy Daddies, he was like, Buddy Daddies? That sounds
like something that would come off of depending on how you interpret that statement, it could be one of two very different things. Well, I really don't want to watch either of them.
Well, and even then, I was trying to sell him on it, and I was like, no, it's great. It's about two male roommates who have to take care of a little girl. And he's like, you're not selling me on this. I'm like, it's It's good. Like, please, please, please just watch it. Like, I'm pretty sure that if you enjoy Spy Family, I think you're really gonna like it. And then, he watched it and he was like, holy cow, that was good. And I said, yeah, they're able to just sell it based on the story alone. And yet you're able to kind of see this broader picture of, like, I don't know how intentional it is, but it's definitely selling me on kind of this broader cultural concept of doesn't matter who you are, you're never ready to have your first kid. But when you have that first kid, there's so many adventures and unexplained, inexplicable slice of life moments that you're gonna have. Because, like, in the story, the two of them are assassins, and I think that makes up a very tiny fraction of 12 episodes. Most of it is like, how do you find a daycare? What happens when your kid gets sick? What happens if, they don't want to eat their food? What happens if, like, one person isn't picking up the slack? That's like 90% of the storytelling. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, good gosh, like, I've lived my whole life watching mostly, like, action and adventure stories, and here I am just captivated because their storytelling is so good. Mark and I we watched, like, Laid Back Camp, which is just about camping. Mark likes camping and I don't, but I was like, there was something really addictive in their storytelling where you can't help it because it creates the feeling of what it's like when you go camping, when you're, like, cozy and, like, bundled up around a fire. Like, that's essentially, like, what they're able to replicate. So hopefully in our storytelling, that's what we're able to sell it on, is it's like people read it and they say, like, man, if you just want a really good story about, like, combat veteran exorcists who just go out there and kick ass for the Lord, that's what you're gonna get. If you want, like, really cute girls who at the end of the day preach a wholesome message about typical classical morality, that's what you get with this book too. At the end, that's what we're trying to sell ourselves on.
Absolutely. Well, I've been buying what you've been selling for going on 3 years, and I ain't got no intention of stopping to do any of that anytime soon. So y'all will be back on the show. After this last few minutes, I'm thinking what we may need to do just for a change of pace next time is do, like, a weeb stream, because obviously we're like on some level of weebery. Well, Doug, where do you fall on weebery?
My wife is the one who is really big into anime and manga, so she sometimes introduces me to stuff like Spy Family. But for the most part, I've been playing Tears of the Kingdom quite a bit lately. So, but yeah, if you do a scheduled stream and it's on a specific, a couple, big name manga or anime, I'll ask my wife to get me up to speed to introduce me, and I could watch it beforehand and comment as the guy who's not nearly as versed in all of this as you are.
All right, cool. Hey, that works fine for me. But for this time, this has been great as usual. You guys, I always love talking with you guys because you have such great insight, but you're also still just real chill dudes that just happen to stumble into being dope ass writers and artists. It's refreshing. Look, as someone who is very much an artist, who is constantly surrounded by people who are very much artists, it's cool to talk to people who are artists but also just regular people.
Well, thank you very much. Like, I know that sometimes artists and writers can be fairly eccentric and eclectic, but maybe it's because I don't know if I'm looking at this objectively or not, but because we've all come from, I guess, normal day jobs at some point in our lives, we like to think that we're a little bit more normal than most people in the creative space.
Oh yeah, man! Look, one time when I get y'all on stream, I'm gonna maybe have another one of my semi-regular co-hosts up here, and y'all gonna see it's some shit. But I mean, it's cool. I love my people, but I also, speaking of that background, like if my dad were still here, he wouldn't be in the room. Like, there would be no conversation because 5 minutes in, he'd just go do something else because we all talking about all anime and the intricacies of all these other things. And he don't went the other room and just turned on women's basketball or something. Ain't got time. But you guys are great. Thank you for coming and chopping it up with your boy again. This has been the Iconic Comics trio. get ready. When is the next Soul Finder coming out, or is that too early in development? to
Soul
say
Finder
yet?
Volume 4 is being colored right now, and Matt told me a couple days ago that there's going to be a huge, Soul Finder dump coming up into the Dropbox in the near future. So that I'm going to try and get that out this year. I think we're on track. And then there's a short story called Noctis Terrari, Soul Finder Night Terrors. Then that should be out in the near future as well. I've been getting all the inks in, and then it's just a matter of getting colored and getting it out there. So those are the two that are on the slate for this year if all goes well.
All right, we got that coming on the horizon. Bit further up on the horizon, we got Common America Volume 8, the conclusion of the There you have two whole sagas, two whole arcs under y'all belt. That is freaking amazing. That is dropping in what's the exact date? I want to get the exact date up there.
We don't have the exact date yet, but right now it's tentatively scheduled for drumbeat either June 14th or June 21st. So that's coming up here pretty soon. It's all going to hinge on... I'm waiting on one piece of merchandise that we need to quality control, and after that, it'll be the green light. So you guys are going to be seeing that pop up in probably less than 2 weeks.
Nice. So definitely make sure y'all are checking out your Twitter feeds and everything. By the time this video goes live, it'll be probably a week or less before that campaign goes live. Look, I say this every time they come on. I'm going to keep saying it. Watch the feed. Make sure you know when it's live. When it gets fulfilled and everything, check your messages. Fill out the survey. You've been putting the same answer in there. Just put it in. Just plug it in there. It's probably on autofill on your phone or whatever. Just put it in there and stop pestering these people about 3-year-old campaigns. The other week, I was clearing out my email. I saw a thing that I backed as like something I backed during a stream one time. I forgot I backed it. It was like 6 months ago. You know what I didn't do? Pester the person about getting the link resent to me because I know it's gone and it's my fault because I should have been on top of it. That's my fault. But don't do that. Don't be like me, kids. Check your emails, fill out your surveys so you can get this greatness. And greatness is coming. I done seen previews of some of the stuff they're dropping. Ooh, the thing keep going up for how fast these things get fulfilled. I think it's probably going to be within 5 minutes this time because yeah, it's gonna be something. But thank y'all for so much for joining me, and thank all y'all out there for watching and listening. Till next time, I'm Animaine, and this has been Doug Ernst, Tim Lim, and Mark Pellegrini of Iconic Comics, and we will talk to y'all later.
Have a good one, guys. Bye-bye.
See ya.